the time of, he's 12, and here he is sitting in the temple, and they're amazed at his questions, the text says. Not his answers, but his questions. Because it's, in order to be intelligent, you have to actually formulate really good questions first, before you come up with answers. In fact, it's better to have, I would rather have a person that has more intelligent questions than they do answers. If you could come up with intelligent questions, that demonstrates that you're understanding the material. So he's sitting there and he's saying, well, what about this? What about that? And they're going, wow, this guy's engaged. Okay? And he's not he's not in the inner circle of the elite, because he didn't go to school for it. Yes.
He has training from his Father in heaven. He has schooling. He has. It's not.
Sure.
So everything's kind of on a different level.
Yeah. Although it's interesting, this question though. That's on one level you're right. Another level though, I want to say, how much of his omniscience did he use and did he interact with while he's here? Not denying he had it, but in his, for instance, here's a classic example in the text we're reading. It says in the text that he knows their thoughts. Well, that's omniscience. So then he responds to them based on that omniscience. But there's other times where it seems he sets that aside, so to speak, and just interacts with people as if they were, as if he needs interaction like any other human does. And where he's doing repartee with them without the omniscience. So it's that balance where he can pick it up and put it down. So we're not dealing with anybody that's like anybody else, clearly. So, but there's times where it says that he has to learn, and he has to take on knowledge just like everybody else does. He can't just rely on omniscience. And he grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. He also had to study. So it's not just as if he can say, well, I'm just going to put this in autopilot on omniscience and just go that direction. He also studies and learns and reads. So yeah, but I hear you. There's both.
Well, he has this relationship, this prayer, this conversation, and he's very. I mean, there's something about that is that we can, even as a child, have that. We just have to put that as an importance, know gods before the God.
Oh yeah, there's absolute purity in who he is. So, no baggage.
No baggage.
He comes with no baggage. All right, go with me to Exodus chapter 25. Just want to get us thinking in this area. Exodus chapter 25. Verse 1, I want you to notice something here with regards to the structure of this text. I've mentioned this before, but I think it's important, and we'll draw some conclusions from it. So I want you to notice verse 1. This is the beginning of the tabernacle. It's called 3 different names, at least in the biblical text. It's called the Mikdash, from the word kadosh, to be holy, the holy place. It's called the Mishkan, from shakan, to dwell. And it's called the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. So you can intersperse those 3, Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, Mishkan, dwelling place, and Mikdash, the holy place. Notice verse 1 says, then the Lord spoke to Moses. Now follow this. We go all the way over to chapter 30 and verse 11. You need to mark this. This is fascinating to me. Verse 11 says, then the Lord spoke to Moses. Verse 17 of the same chapter says, Exodus 30, then the Lord spoke to Moses. That's the 3rd time. Verse 22, the Lord spoke to Moses. Number 4. Number 5, verse 34. And the Lord said to Moses, that's number 5. Number 6, and the Lord, chapter 31, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, and then number 7, verse 12 of chapter 31, and the Lord said to Moses. It's 7 times. Then what do you know? Verse 13 says, speak also to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbaths you shall keep. So there's 7 phases of the tabernacle, and then we start talking about the Sabbath. Sounds like creation. 7 phases of creation, 7 days, and then we start talking about Sabbath. So 7 times, as he's giving them instructions, it says, and the Lord said to Moses. It does that 7 times. When we get to the end of the 7th, we start talking about the Sabbath. Now, why do you think we start talking about the Sabbath at the end of this? We'll talk about that in a moment. But notice how creation and the tabernacle are welded together in the mind of the author, Moses here, okay? We've talked about this before, that when we come to Genesis 1, 2, and 3, we come to this oftentimes with our 20th century scientific background, as if we're going to talk about science in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Chapters 1, 2, and 3, if you're reading the text in Hebrew, and you come to chapter 25 of Exodus, you start saying to yourself, there's a lot of similar language here. This God Eden was a tabernacle. It was the place where God would dwell with us. I've mentioned before to you that there's probably over 20 verbal similarities and nominal noun similarities between the Garden of Eden and the later tabernacle here. So that they were, what's the point of the tabernacle? What's the point of the tabernacle? The holiness of God dwelling with men. That God would be with us. That He would have a place where He resided with us. So what happens? 7 days, and we come to the Shabbat. 7 phases of the tabernacle, and we come to Shabbat. Now, why discuss Shabbat, though? We've already discussed it. Why do we have to talk about it again? Because somebody building the tabernacle would think to themselves, in the construction of it, since I'm building the tabernacle, and this is a good thing, I mean, it's a great thing. Since I'm building the tabernacle, I'm doing a good thing. I should be allowed to continue working on the tabernacle during Shabbat. And he says, no, don't work on the tabernacle. Don't even work on the tabernacle during Shabbat. Here's why. Sacred time trumps sacred space. Sacred time trumps sacred space. So you need to cease from working on the tabernacle and observe the Shabbat. Because the Shabbat is a picture of the world to come. It's about the eternal future. It's a picture of the time when everything will be what it's supposed to be. So you have to cease your labors on this. You have to put everything down and just rest in my sovereignty. Even if you're building a tabernacle, even if you're building this most holy place, you have to cease. Any comments or thoughts? You see people kind of wheels turning. Yes, ma'am.
And that's because it's like an instruction for our benefit from the holy God. It's a command that sets that order that you're talking about. Yes.
That sacred time, Shabbat, will trump sacred space, the tabernacle. We will cease building the tabernacle while we observe the Shabbat. Yeah.
If that's the case, then why do we have workers working in the tabernacle or in the temple on Shabbat?
It's a great question. There's a difference between that type. There's different types of work. The work of intercession must always continue. The work of construction must cease. There's a different type of work. The priest in the tabernacle will continue to minister and intercede, which requires movement and doing things, but they're not constructing. They're not supposed to build anything. Everything's already built. No construction. Preservation, administration, yes. Two different areas.
So holy work trumps holy day and holy space.
Yeah, holy work does.
Holy work.
Holy ministry. Yes. Holy. Yes, absolutely. So if what you're going to do is holy, then you can do it in sacred time. As long as what you're doing is ministry, not construction.
To do no laborious work.
No laborious work. If another person needs you to help them pull themselves out of a ditch because they have a broken leg, that's not work, that's ministry. If somebody says to you, hey, come over to my house and help me build another wing of the house on Shabbat. No. That's work.
Even if it's a chapel they're building.
Even if it's a chapel they're building. Yeah, even if they're building the church. Come help us build a church on Shabbat. No, don't do that. If it's people-oriented, helping them to minister to them, that's different. That's not. If you're continuing the work of God, that's different.
Like if their house fell down or something and they needed a place that night to live, everybody would join in and kind of help them out.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. That's different. So one is ministry, one is working to mediate, not to construct. Those are different types of, one is mediation. That's different. Fundamentally different. Any other questions or comments? Yes,
So it's almost like if you're a physician, and you're always helping people. So in a way you can kind of justify that you're not going to stop helping people on the Sabbath just because it's the Sabbath. Because I guess whenever God can move through you to help somebody or bless somebody,
Sure.
it could be a good indication right there that it's okay.
right. Good point. Trying to help us think through this, okay? So, yes.
In the case of the man that was stoned because he was picking up sticks on the Sabbath, if the man was sick and I went out and picked up sticks for him, would I be stoned?
Depends on the reason why you picked up the sticks.
Yes, of course.
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of this. Okay, here's a classic example. The rabbis were against building, because of this text, they were against building fires on Shabbat. There's a famous story in the rabbinic literature, so that it's relevant to what we're talking about. They would charge prior to Shabbat, Friday night before the sun went down, they would charge a couple of shekels to come in and listen all Shabbat to the teaching at this one house. Well, Rabbi Akiva couldn't afford the 2 shekels, so what he did is he went up on the roof of this house and he listened through the chimney because he didn't have the money for the 2 shekels, but he didn't want to miss the teaching. As the story goes, as he's up there on the roof, the snow begins to fall, and he's so entranced by the teaching that he gets covered by the snow. Later on, they hear him fall off the roof.
Ouch.
He falls off the roof, and they hear something outside. They go outside of this house, and they pick up this rabbi, and they come inside. Now they don't have a fire inside. And someone asks, he's pretty much frozen. If we don't start a fire, he probably won't live. So they said, you know what? Because of life, we need to start the fire. For the preservation of life. Okay, I have no problem with that. What's the motive? What's the purpose? If the purpose is to save life, yes, but look at what Yeshua is doing. The work that Yeshua is doing on the Sabbath isn't going around and carpentering. He's not doing carpentry work. He's healing people. He's restoring people. If the work you're doing is restoration and healing and help and deliverance from pain, yes. But if it's, well, I just need to hang up some shingles, I need to put up some stuff here, and that's not the kind of thing he's doing. Yes.
Sounds like if you don't take the time during the week to prepare, that's one thing, versus somebody who is a dire need at that moment, that would be okay. But for the man who was out picking up sticks because he didn't prepare the day before to have enough sticks for a fire to keep himself warm during the day.
Yeah, there has to be preparation.
PPP.
All right, go to the note for just a second, those who have
That's
the
the dire need because he didn't prepare.
But that's his fault.
I want to, on the second paragraph.
Quit being a lawyer.
Yes,
His whole purpose, he wants to dwell in our hearts.
yes,
If a heart is right with God, the Sabbath will have the right meaning.
agreed. And you'll do the right thing.
That's right. And that's what he wants.
Right. It's never wrong to do good on the Shabbat. Is it lawful to do good on the Shabbat? Yes. Well, what is good? Is it good for you? Or is it good for your
Someone
fellow
else.
man? See, that's the problem is people say, well, I want to do my own good. I'll do good for me. I want to build my kingdom. He said, look, stop building your kingdom and address the needs of your fellow man. That's okay. For instance, I have a friend today who attends a Sunday church, and he's very Sabbatarian in his thinking and very pro-Shabbat in his thinking. And you know what he's doing today? He's out on the street corner handing out water and food. And frankly, I think he's right on. Now, I don't think you should ever stop coming to an assembly completely, but he's out there giving away free to people who don't have food and water. And is that a Shabbat activity? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, it's good to understand this, because it's, you shall have no other gods before me, and it's good for, we have to grasp these concepts, otherwise you see the churches who are having, on Saturday, we have a car show in our parking lot, you know.
Right.
You know, they just, we get our mindset so world-like, we don't even think that how God is thinking anymore.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's why I said, if you orbit around feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, housing those on the streets, visiting the sick, visiting those in prison, and mourning with those who mourn, you will orbit around the things that God orbit around. Heal the sick, visit those who mourn, go to the prisons, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, help those who are in need. If you can't find anybody who's in need, you're not looking hard enough. You're just not looking hard enough. Now, I want to make a point from the second. Where did they get the material? Where did they get the material for the tabernacle?
Egypt.
From Egypt. He says, I want you to ask the Egyptians for things to take with you when you go. Take all this stuff. So they get it from Egypt. So I wrote at the end of chapter 2, in paragraph 2, here is a truth that our Torah text brings home. God is always at work within his children, even when they are unaware of his plans. The corollary to that is that God is able to move even those who deny him, the Egyptians, into a place where even they accomplish his will. Think about that for a moment. Hey, I'm going to favorably dispose the Egyptians to give you stuff. And the reason by the way, here's the point. The reason I'm giving you the stuff, the gold, the silver, and all this stuff, is not so that you can build your house. I want you to build my house. And put it right in the middle of everybody. So everybody has access to it. God is always doing something in you today that prepares you for tomorrow, even though you can't see it. So he gives them all this stuff, and they think, why do we need all this stuff? Well, just wait. I'm going to get you out in the wilderness, and I want you to build a place for me. I want you to have a house so that I can come and dwell with you. Now, there are 3 primary colors of the tabernacle. Tola'at, which they think comes from some kind of worm. By the way, it's okay to have animals that are not kosher involved in the tabernacle as long as you're not eating them. You can use the skins and the colorings and all the other stuff that goes with it. You just can't ingest them. People go, well, how come they got all these animals that are unclean around the tabernacle? Well,
Except for pig.
except for pig. Well, they don't use pig.
Pig
But-
says don't even touch the carcass.
right. Well, you can't touch the carcass. But once it's skinned, then there's debate as to whether one can still touch it or not. But like, for instance, these worms,
Can't touch the carcass.
Not the actual, like,
yeah, the
like
worm,
the squid is,
the squid they take the ink from, but that's,
Yeah.
but Tola'at, let's go back to the 3 colors. But like, for instance, there's badger, they translate it in your text, either porpoise or badger. That's for the covering of the tabernacle to make it rainproof. Dolphin, they say dolphin, but dolphin's not kosher. But you can use the skins to cover the tabernacle to make it waterproof.
There are dolphins in the Mediterranean.
There are dolphins in the tree. Okay, so listen to
back
this.
then,
Red Sea.
yeah. Back then,
Tola'at, Argamon, which they translate, most of your translations say purple. So Tola'at, Argamon, and then, interestingly enough, Tekelet. Which those of you that know your Hebrew know that Tekelet is in the Zitzi. Now watch this.
What color was the worm?
Tola'at.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, the color itself is they'll translate it. They'll translate it like scarlet or crimson. By the way, you guys have a translation. You guys have a translation in front of you. I can remember going word for word through this, myself and another guy. We went word for word through these texts. There are tons of words that we don't really know for sure, especially colors and all these construction terms. We're not exactly sure. Your translations make it all simple, okay? So it's nice because you have a translation in front of you that's kind of smooth everything out. But there are a lot of, I mentioned this in the note, there are a lot of what we call hapax legomena. It's a Latin term which means a word only used once. So we don't have any other contextual places to go to see how this word is used. A lot of that in this narrative here, in these chapters. So go with me in your Bibles to Exodus 28. I'm going to show you a text. Exodus chapter 28, and look at verse 36. Exodus chapter 28, verse 36. Speaking of the high priest, it says, "You shall also make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it the engraving of a signet, holiness to the Lord. And you shall put on it a thread of blue, that it may be on the turban. It shall be on the front of the turban. So it shall be on Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear," and it goes on here, "this patil tekelet." This thread of blue is the same phrase that's used in Numbers chapter 15, 37 to 41. So that one of the 3 primary colors of the tabernacle is tekelet. And the high priest is to have this patil tekelet on his turban. The reason why God tells us later on to wear the tzitzit is so that every person can have a reminder that they're connected to the tabernacle and they're connected to the priesthood. He wants them to know that they're connected to this, and that thread connects you to the tabernacle and to the priesthood. So that your clothing reminds you, when you wear it, that you are intricately connected to and needing this tabernacle and this priesthood. This priest mediates for you. And this tabernacle speaks of God's presence among you. So, as the high priest wears a patil tekelet, a thread of blue, you're to have a patil tekelet around you all the time. So that's why you put that thread of blue in there. Any questions or comments? Yes, yes, sir.
Do you have to wear it at school?
Do you have to wear it at school? It would depend on what you were doing at school. If you were doing something dangerous around machinery or carpentry or things that might be problematic, I would say no. However, if you're just sitting in a classroom, I would say yes. So it depends on what you're doing. So if it could get caught into something, I had an interesting, let me tell you about this. I went to a local school in Tacoma. Show you how God works. Because I was going there on behalf of another organization, I chose at that time not to wear the kippah. Because I was going to a public high school, Curtis High School in Tacoma. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to wear the tzitzit because I figured nobody knows what those are. They're not even going to care. And the kids will probably figure it's part of some gang thing, you know.
Yeah.
So I figured, you know, I'd be like, yeah, I'm in a gang, man. Yeah, you know, it's
The
like,
Hebrew hoodlums.
yeah, we're together, man. It's like, you know. So I don't wear the kippah. This girl walks up to me. And she says, "So you're wearing tzitzit, huh?" She's 15 years old and she's in this class and she says, "So you're wearing tzitzit, huh?" I said, "How do you know what those are?" She looks at me, no lie, this is what she says. This is how a 15-year-old, she goes, "Come on, dude, the Torah's cool." And I was like, okay. Didn't say anything to her, she walked off, right? So I come back the next day for the same presentation, and she walks up to me and she says, "My dad wants me to tell you Baruch Hashem." Right? And I said, okay, you got to tell me who your dad is. Write it down. So she writes his name down. Do you remember 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was gone,
Yeah.
Don spoke?
Yeah,
That was his daughter.
yeah.
Oh, cool.
So it's fascinating how God moves and how He works. But the whole point of the tekelet in the tzitzit was to say, you are connected to this tabernacle and to this priesthood. Everybody remains connected by that thread. Don't ever forget your connection to these. Yes.
Well, and the tzitzit itself, it's like I envision it as a wedding ring.
Yeah.
Because he says, so that you will remember and you will not stray and go on
Right.
your own way.
Exactly. I think it's like a wedding band. I think I might said it as well, that it's a wedding band. A wedding band doesn't make you married. It just reminds you that you are.
Right.
So it's not, you know.
And other people too.
And other people too, hopefully, yes. You know, hopefully if they see that you're wearing a wedding band, then it's, okay, this person's married, yes.
And as a female, do we probably need to be careful and recognize how it's perceived as a female, because there might just be some congregations